Okay, right, so backups, general concepts. I don't want to have to go through everything again, so I'll just go through a few quick questions to see if everybody knows what I'm talking about. First of all, anybody not understand the basic concepts behind Time Machine? Okay, I can skip that. So basically, recording multiple generational backups using one, or if you're running a recent enough operating system, multiple hard drives, so you can cycle between them. As a matter, just for reference, I have two of my Time Machine backups here. My one that I normally keep at work, which is on a nice little 2.5 inch, 4 terabyte hard drive, which was now getting reasonably affordable, and the previous one I was using, which is in a 3.5 inch drive with an enclosure with its own power supply. That's only a 3 terabyte hard drive in there at the moment, but I can make it bigger if I need to. I can pull the drive out and replace it, and obviously there's a big difference in terms of convenience. So that's not very portable. That one is nicely portable. So I actually have a third one which is at home, so I do not have all my backups with me at the moment. So in case if an asteroid strikes this room, I will still have it back up at home. Not that I'll be able to do much with it. Okay, so Time Machine, it's been there ever since day one, and I strongly recommend everybody use it as the by far easiest method of making sure you've got a backup of your computer. You pretty much plug a hard drive in. If you haven't set it up yet, it asks you a question: do you want to use this drive to use the Time Machine? You say yes, off it goes, and does it. And then you've got a backup copy of what's on your computer. If you want to get a bit fancier, you can go into System Preferences, Time Machine, and under its options, you can adjust by excluding things from your Time Machine backups. So I have deliberately excluded, that doesn't exist anymore, so it can go. Things like files that belong to particular people I didn't want to include in my backups. My rather large collection of virtual machines which don't back up tidily with Time Machine, so I don't want that littering my Time Machine backup drives and chewing through space on them. So my Time Machine backups are not a complete backup of my computer. They're a backup of the operating system, all the applications and all the important data files, but not certain big things that I've accumulated. So it's sort of like my big storage areas I've not backed up that way, and I make sure I have other copies of those. Okay.
Do you have to actually fill in those names, or do they come up with the top?
Which names?
Those options.
If you go into options and you want to actually add something to it, you just click the plus button and pick a folder, and it adds it just shows it as a full path name. That's all. So that's just the way it's displaying it. So that's the internal representation of how path names get stored in macOS. So tilde is your home folder. So the home folder documents, and then ITV archive. So if I've got any saved TV programs on here, they won't get backed up, for example. If you do have multiple backup drives, that's what it looks like in here. You can see a list of all of them. The other one at home, it hasn't done a backup since the 8th of March, so it's a bit out of date, but close enough that I'm not too worried about it at this stage. Both my other ones have been backed up today, so they're showing reasonably current times. If you want to add or remove additional backup disks, there's an obvious button for it there. For some insane reason, Apple changes the details of what that says, depending on whether you've currently got one or more than one drive. So it looks a little bit different, but you look at the bottom of the list for a command to add a second disk if you want to do that. And if you do have multiple Time Machine disks, they're all copies of everything. You can't pick some things to go on one Time Machine and some things to go on a different Time Machine. They're all complete backups of your computer. Right, so restoring from Time Machine, everybody at least vaguely aware of how to do individual file restores using the Enter Time Machine feature. So that's where you're going to sort of like the outer space view and restoring files. That's one that's, I know we've run into people getting confused by before. The other one that's worth mentioning is if you want to restore your entire operating system, your complete backup, say for example to a new computer, that's not done using the Time Machine Restore User Interface, that's done using the recovery volume. So you actually boot your Mac from recovery, and there's an option in there which I don't know if I can show you without restarting my computer, but I can show you on another one. So if I just get that set up, while we keep talking, I can show you what it looks like. Hopefully this machine's battery isn't too dead. This computer may be familiar to you as well, Reg. If I just run this around here, so I won't show you on the screen, but if I just start that up and hold down, Command too late probably, Command R, if I get it in time, I'll find out in a minute. Just thinking about it, so the question is that the recovery or is that normal startup? I think that's recovery because it would have asked me for password by now, so yeah, I can let go now. So I'll let that finish starting up, but that's going into the recovery volume, so you can see there it looks like a normal startup. It's just showing the Apple logo. And once that's finished, if somebody can tell me the screen's changed so I can go and have a look at it again, then we can continue with that part of the discussion.
But David, what happens if your computer is no longer working, which could be the point, or it's stolen so you don't have
Right, as long as you've still got your time machine backup drive, you've got a replacement computer. That computer, when you run the new computer in recovery instead, you use the recovery feature on the new one and tell it to restore, or the better way of approaching it in that case, if it's a different computer, is to actually go through the initial setup, and one of the questions it asks you is, do you want to transfer data from an existing Mac or backup? And you say yes. You then get to pick your time machine backup drive as the source, and it does a migration rather than restoring all the files. Because if you do a full restore of the time machine drive, it will only work on a Mac that is compatible with that particular operating system. So it's better to go to, if you go to a different Mac, it's better to use the migration method rather than the full restore method. So this would only be applicable.
It's changed now.
Oh, good, right. So this method would be applicable, for example, if your hard drive had died, you've got a brand new hard drive in your computer. So you can just see that. It's got Mac OS utilities. The restore from time machine backup is the very first item. And then followed by reinstall Mac OS, get help, and disk utility. So if I go into restore from time machine backup, I can't easily demonstrate an expert without fiddling around with plugging in drives. But effectively what it does is it looks for a connected time machine drive. If it finds one, it lets you pick it from a list. It then lists all of the available backups in that drive, lets you pick one particular backup that you want to restore. Usually it's the latest one, but occasionally you may have a particular reason to restore an older one. And then you say go ahead, you choose where you want to restore to. It says I'm going to have to wipe everything on that drive. Are you sure you want to restore where you want to put it? And you can actually use that to roll your entire computer back to any point in the past if you really want to, but it's very time consuming because it's got to copy everything. But that is the method you'd use to do a full system restore.
So a migration is to another computer.
A migration is used for another
device.
computer. A restore is used for the same computer is the basic rule there. So the migration, the easiest way to do that is while you are setting up a new Mac or you've just done a fresh install of a new operating system, one of the early questions it asks you is, do you want to restore data from another Mac or from a backup? And if you choose no at that point, you can go through and finish setting it up with a new user account and so forth. But at the end of that, it's then tricky to get everything back off your backup again, unless you run migration system, which can run into problems with mixing up user accounts. So it's definitely easy doing it during initial setup.
So a migration would also bring all the hiccups and...
It basically copies everything which is either, by default, you can tweak it if you want to, but it copies all your user accounts with all your preferences, all your documents, all your applications, all the customizations to your operating system and any other files on your computer. It doesn't copy the actual operating system because that's already there.
Yes.
So it only copies the files within the operating system. And it's also worth noting that you can't go down to an older version of the operating system that way. You can only go the same version or up. So if you're on, for example, Mojave at the moment, Mac OS 10.14, and you happen to buy a replacement Mac which has High Sierra on it, you can't migrate from Mojave to High Sierra. You've got to upgrade the other machine to Mojave first, then you can migrate. So that gets a bit messy in some cases. That's where you probably need my help to get it into the right state.
Would you try and clean up stuff that you didn't want before you do do a backup and then do a migration?
If you're trying to do either a full restore or a migration, you have no opportunity to clean anything up beforehand because you have to copy everything or with very limited control over what doesn't get copied.
Okay, if you haven't lost the machine or something, you would clean it up or do anything that you wanted to get rid of, and then do a backup, and then
Yeah, possibly.
migrate.
Yeah, that might be one way of doing it. The difficulty is often you don't know what you need to clean up and you don't necessarily get it. But I have a recurring problem I'm having which I don't know what the cause is, and I think it's something installed in my operating system where one particular application I can't open its disk image for installing its software updates because it keeps saying that this disk image is damaged. And it only happens on this computer and only if I boot normally. If I boot in other ways it doesn't do it. So I've got something buried in my operating system that doesn't like those disk images.
I still get some files that refer back to Appleworks.
Yeah.
I don't suppose that's a problem.
One thing I have run into as a general piece of advice, if you're planning to migrate stuff to a new computer and you're going to do it via a time machine backup disk, and like you just bought a new Mac for example, it's useful to keep in mind that the way that Time Machine deletes its old backups after it thinks that there's a newer one there, it always keeps the first one of the day. So if you have done multiple backups on the same day and you want to potentially come back and use the same backup again a few days later, the first one of the day is the one that will be there for a month, not a later one of the day. Yeah. So it's helpful sometimes to deliberately not back up your computer by ejecting your Time Machine backup drive, making sure everything's in the right state, then plugging your Time Machine drive in for the first time that day and making sure it's done a backup, and you then know that one's going to be there for a month. Okay? But if you do, for example, let it do a backup, do a bunch of changes, let it do another backup or do one manually, and then decide, right, I've now finished, I've got it in the right state, and you then come back to it 3 days later, you'll find that that last backup you use is not there anymore. It's only got the one from the start of the day, the very first one it did. So you need to be aware of the order in which it does things. Just the pruning tactic is just always keep the first one of the day and until a month later, and then it deletes them as well, except it keeps one every week. So it's always the first one from one of the days in the week, but you can't predict which one of the week it is either.
If your house burns down and you've got your latest backup at a different address.
Yes.
I mean, I've just done this and I backed up immediately before I left the house thinking, I know that the only one it saves is the one I did this morning.
Yes.
But if I can, if something happened, you're saying I can't connect to that most recent.
No, well, basically, if you do another backup on that drive, if you let it do another backup on the same drive, it will start pruning what it regards as old backups. So if there is a particular backup on a Time Machine drive you want to retain for a little while, you need to make sure it's the first one of the day, because then that will retain it for a month.
When you leave it, 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Well, you can't unless you arrange to not do any backups prior to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. If you're planning ahead for it, you leave your drive unplugged, and then just before you go, you plug your drive in and do one backup, and that one becomes the first one of the day.
And if you haven't done that, there's nothing left to do.
No, except stop backing up, basically.
Well,
If you
I have stopped backing up, I'm here.
Yeah, no, but like if you turn off Time Machine's backup automatically feature and don't do any manual backup, in fact, you probably can do manual backups. It's the backup automatically feature that goes and does the pruning. So if you turn off automatic backups temporarily, obviously you don't want to leave it off, then that will stop Time Machine from deleting your most recent backup.
That's all right then, because I did a manual backup just before.
Yeah, but there are exceptions to that. If, for example, the drive is already full and it can't do a backup, then it will start to prune all backups to make room for the next one, even if it's not set to do automatic backups.
That's not a problem.
So yeah, must be there's a few. I've experimented a few times with these sorts of things, and there's all sorts of weird edge cases it has. Another important rule to be aware of, I've found with Time Machine, is that your backup drive absolutely must be at least double the capacity that your source drive is going to be, or the maximum that your source drive is going to be. So, for example, if you have a 1 terabyte hard drive inside your iMac, just to take an example, and you never fill it above 500 gigs, then a 1 terabyte backup drive is sufficient. Just. If, on the other hand, you have a 1 terabyte iMac and you get it to about 800 gigs full, then you need at least a 1.6 terabyte backup drive to be on the safe side. if you violate that rule, there will be some point in the future where Time Machine suddenly thinks, oh, I need to work out from scratch what I need to back up again. In order to do that, I've got to delete all your backups to get back to the point where I know what's going on. It can't do that unless it drives at least twice the capacity of your source data. So as a rule, I always say make sure your backup drive is twice as big as your expected usage level of your source drive.
And you don't get a warning.
No.
I found my mistake and read it back up, I didn't know why.
No, the warning it gives you is the first time it deletes old backups. No, there's actually a different one. It doesn't ever warn you about pruning old backups to make more room. The one it does do is after it's completely run out of space and starts deleting the oldest weekly backup, it tells you after it's done that it's just deleted the oldest weekly backup. Yeah. So another important thing to keep in mind with Time Machine drives is do not treat it as an archive. It does not keep things permanently. You should treat it as a backup copy of stuff you've still got somewhere else. If you want to keep a file, don't delete it, is the rule. And the other rule related to that is if you need space on your internal drive and therefore you've got to delete something, put it on an external drive and make sure that external drive is also being backed up, e.g. with Time Machine. So that is the state I'm going to be in shortly, because if you have a look at my disk space in Finder, you'll see I currently have 28.7 gigabytes free on a 1 terabyte drive. I'm seriously short of disk space. I'm probably going to be able to get back up to about 100 again, which is where I'd rather have it, but it's getting to the point now where I'm going to have to delete a bunch of stuff, and that's why I've got this thing. So I'm going to use one of these as my less frequently used offline storage, which I plug in when I need it, and I'll be dumping a bunch of stuff that I don't need quite so often onto there, and that will free up a lot of space on my internal drive, and then I'll make sure that's backed up as well as my internal drive.
And how will you remember what's on what?
I won't need to, I'll plug it in and it'll be available. I've had to find things with Spotlight. And it'll be quite a clear distinction. In my case, I've got so much stuff in virtual machines, I can free up 300 gigs of disk space just by moving all my virtual machines onto here. And that's, if I want to run VMware Fusion, I plug this in and that's all I need to do. It's that sort of major division of functionality. If I had a vast amount of movies or something like that on here, I could dump all the movies on here or something like that. My iTunes library is getting quite big. Because I've got iTunes Match, I'm probably going to revert that onto things I don't care about. I'll just delete from the computer and I can still get them off the cloud. So there's that sort of thing as well. But that's really a topic for a different time. So, but that's just as a general piece of advice anyway. If you do need to split your data up, however you decide to do that, make sure that both your drives in that case are backed up, because you don't want to lose your data. You must have at least 2 copies of everything to be sure that simple accident doesn't delete all copies of everything effectively, or hardware failure.
What's the interface of those?
These little drives are they've actually got a USB-C plug on them, and they come with both a USB-C to C and a C to A cable, so they'll plug into older Macs and newer Macs without you having to buy anything else. They are actually USB 3.1 Gen 2 interface. That's the 10 megabit per second super speed USB. So in theory they're faster than you can possibly get from a USB 3.0 or 5 gigabit one. No, it plugs into a USB port. So if you had an older Mac which has got USB 2, for example, they won't be very fast. There's not a lot of point. If you have a 2012-ish or later Mac with USB 3 ports, though, they'll be fast enough to be useful compared to internal storage. You can't plug into Thunderbolt 2 unless you have a dock or something like that. Thunderbolt 2 USB dock or something like that. Thunderbolt 3 is fine because it's also USB-C, so they plug straight into that. Yeah.
What
So,
do you ask for to buy those?
well, this particular one I've been talking about is a Samsung T5. Samsung's the brand T5 portable SSD or portable SSD T5. I didn't bring the box with me, but it just says Samsung. They're available in places like Noel Leeming, but the cheapest source I found for them as a retail outlet is PV Technology, who are down on Manor Street, Vivian Street, right? Yep. Where Magnum Mac used to be. if anybody remembers back that far, near Cambridge Terrace. So they're right down there. It's worth waiting till they have one of their apparently weekly sales where they happen to include these on special, because they seem to be having. I get emails from them so often saying the latest sales on. Oh yeah, okay, we only had one like a week ago. It's ludicrous. It's like Briscoe's.
Samsung T?
Samsung Portable SSD T5. I can show you the web page just so you can see what it is.
Sorry, David, what's the shop called now?
PB Technology.
PV?
Oh, there we go.
They've got an exciting
PV.
There you go. That's
parking area.
500 gig one. Yes, it's interesting to get into, isn't it? Yes.
It's worth coming out. Though.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yes, $218.99 is their standard price for the 500 gig one. Portable hard drives external, they've got it under. So if I go for brands, switch brands to only Samsung, that will reduce the list of options. Right, there we go, that gives you the list of prices. So the 256 gig one, 250 gig one's $159, the 500 gig one's $218, so that's obviously a lot cheaper by volume. Then you get up into the 1 terabyte one and it's getting close to $500, but I bought that one for more like $320 by waiting for a sale, so definitely worth keeping an eye out for that. And they have got a 2 terabyte one which is nearly $1,000, but again, I don't know if I've seen that one on special, but I think it was on 600 and something at one occasion. So, but if you need that much storage, you might be looking at some better solution anyway.
You said those were very slow.
No, these are substantially faster than the hard drive because they're solid state. They have no seek delays. They are faster than the fastest possible hard drive you could ever plug into, a single hard drive you could ever plug into, even if it didn't have any data delivery delays. And they are not as fast, however, as Apple's internal solid-state drives, which are in the order of up to 6 times faster again. They're ridiculously fast for data reading, at least. For writing, they're not quite that fast, but for reading, Apple's internal SSDs are getting into the 2.5 gigabytes per second range. These are more like 500 or 600 megabytes per second. Still, hard drives are 150 megabytes per second and have got seek delays, so it's an order of magnitude improvement.
They're not the fastest backup out there, though.
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily want to use these as a backup.
But, yeah.
One thing to keep in mind with solid-state drives is you don't know what their data retention is like. If you use one of these sorts of things as a backup device and put it away for a while, it might lose all of its contents. A hard drive is less likely to do that because it's storing things magnetically. So I'd recommend using hard drives for backups. These are better for storage of data that you don't want to put on your internal drive for some reason, or you wanted to move it from one computer to another or whatever. So, yeah.
David, can you put all your photos on there and then drag
Yes.
them back and open them?
Yes, you can. What you can do is you can effectively move your photo library to a different location, and in Photos, when you start it up, I think you hold down the Option key and it lets you pick a photo library to use. So what you could do is just take your Photos library, copy it to an external, obviously while Photos is not running, copy it to your external drive, and then you relaunch Photos holding down the Option key and you pick the one on the external drive, and that then becomes the default. So after that point it will use that one instead of the internal one. So that could be used for that sort of either moving your photo library or something similarly large onto external storage. It is worth mentioning these by default come formatted as what's known as exFAT, which is a cross-platform Windows-centric but not particularly fancy file system. If you're going to use it primarily as a Mac device, it's a good idea to reformat it as a Mac native file system so it will perform slightly better than it does as a Windows one. They also have features on these things for encryption that Samsung offers, but if you're concerned about encrypting things, you're better off using Apple's standard encryption tools, which are a topic which is too complicated for me to cover tonight because it'll take too long. But if people want to talk about that, we can at a later meeting go through the options there, because that's a bit fiddly as well, especially if you want to boot from the drive. If it's only a data drive, it's a bit easier.
What was the format?
They come as exFAT. I'd suggest using macOS Extended as the
extended.
yeah, or maybe APFS if you're running Mojave. There is a trick which I went through at a recent meeting. You can't actually see drive level partitioning options in disk utility by default unless you go through extra steps. So I'll just show you briefly where that was. Under the view menu in disk utility in the last couple of operating systems, why is it thinking about it? Come on. There's an option to show only volumes or show all devices. By default that's show only volumes, so you can only see the partition itself, not the entire drive. And in order to turn on some of the options, you've got to actually erase the drive at the drive device level, not the volume level. So if I go back to the default, I only see two icons here. If I plug one of these in, which one do I want? That one? My USB cable, find which way it goes. I have again suffered in the last week plug the cable in, no it doesn't fit, plug it in the other way, no it doesn't fit, plug it in the first way. Yes it does, it's the nice feature about how you go away with that. So I now plug that one in. If I look in disk utility, so you can see there it's only showing Samsung T5 as a volume, and if I click on that, I'm not sure whether I even reformatted this one. Why is this having a think about things all the time? I don't know why it's doing that. Come on. You're holding me up. Yep, so that's that one I haven't reformatted. That's just in its original format. So because I've got two of them, I'm intending to use that one as a sort of a big file transfer mechanism for going to PC. So I'll probably leave it in its original format. But my other one I've Mac formatted. So from there, if I go erase, I have a limited set of options because I'm only trying to erase the volume, not the entire drive. So I have to go up to the view menu, turn on show all devices, and now I suddenly see all the extra icons, and now I can click on that icon, which is the drive. I see that it's master boot record, which is the standard Windows format, and now if I choose erase, I get to choose scheme of GUID partition Mac, which is the Apple native one. And then from there I can now choose all the Mac file systems, which I couldn't do before. So I could choose APFS or macOS Extended, journaled, and or encrypted if I want to. But I couldn't do that until I changed the partition scheme. So I can go over that again at some point, but I've done that a couple of times in recent meetings. I just wanted to make sure you're aware of that at this stage. If you have any questions, always you have my email address and I can point you in the right direction again. Okay, so any other backup related things? So I've sort of talked about Time Machine, restoring, migrating briefly, though I can't demonstrate that one easily. Clones versus backups would be the other one to be aware of. Time Machine backups are great for keeping copies of all your stuff, including multiple generations, but if your computer dies and you want to use it immediately, you can't use a Time Machine drive to boot your computer and run from it straight away. All you can do is boot from it and restore it to something else, so your computer will be out of action for however many hours or potentially days if you have a lot of data it takes to restore all that data to another drive. So you have to have a working drive first. If you, on the other hand, have a clone, you have a copy of all your data in the state it was at the point you took that clone on a separate drive, and you can boot from that drive and use your computer straight away. So it may be slower than your normal storage because it's probably an external hard drive, but at least allows you to get up and running quickly in an emergency. So in addition to my Time Machine backups, I also have a series of drives that I use, try not to scratch anything with that, which I keep a clone copy of my computer on, which I update. As a matter of habit, I try to update one of these every time Apple releases a new operating system update. So I update it just before I install the next minor version. So I've got a sort of every month or two I've got a new one of those. So that gives me a point of reference copy of everything on my computer as at that point in time. And it also gives me a drive I can boot in an emergency if something goes seriously wrong with everything on my main computer. I can use that to boot a different computer from a copy of what's on my computer if I need to. There's a few other options around that area. The software I normally use for cloning now is one called Carbon Copy Cloner, it even says so in the name, which I've just updated so it wants to complain about it. So Carbon Copy Cloner is a bit more expensive than the other one I've used called SuperDuper. SuperDuper is free as long as you only want to do a straight copy of your computer. It costs money if you want to, as a one-off payment, if you want to use its smart update feature, which is much faster if you want to update an existing clone. Carbon Copy Cloner costs about twice as much as the super duper fee, but it's a much more powerful piece of software that does quite a lot more. So I'm moving over gradually to using Carbon Copy Cloner now. So it has various tasks you can set up. So I've already have tasks set up for 2 of my clone drives that I've already updated using Carbon Copy Cloner. The other 2 there are ones I've just done at different points. So that's a backup copy of one of my other 4 terabyte drives. I use Carbon Copy Cloner to copy that to a different one. But it's got you can set up automatic clones on a schedule. You can have it configured so when you plug a drive in, it will automatically back up to that drive or clone to that drive. Carbon Copy Cloner also has a feature, thank you, where it doesn't just retain a complete copy of what's on your drive, it can also keep copies of things that you've deleted, as long as you've got enough space on your backup drive. So that's sometimes useful. It's sort of like a mini Time Machine-like thing, but it's not as flexible as Time Machine. I've never bothered using that because I use Time Machine for that sort of stuff, but it's worth mentioning that feature. It's also able to selectively copy things. So if you want part of your drive cloned for some reason, you can set that up as well, but I only used it for full drive clones. Cost about $50, sort of order of magnitude, might be $50 US, that sort of price range.
Question on that.
Yep.
You know how you told us, that was what, one of my other questions about, you told us about these little SD things that don't protrude.
They're designed to sit in there. Which of these, the Carbon Copy Cloner and the Super Duper, can kind of recognise that as being part of your Mac?
They don't, because they're a separate volume. All these things are designed to copy a particular volume.
So I realise that, so I just wondered if it had the facility to be told, copy this as well.
So just so people know what we're talking about, this is the sort of thing Margaret's talking about. It's a special low-profile solid-state drive, not what I'm talking about, SD card that fits in the slot of my computer and does not protrude at all, so it's flush with the surface. It's got a little thumb hook on it so you can pull it out so that it doesn't get stuck in there. But this is actually a nifty mini drive SD to micro SD adapter, so the actual storage is on a micro SD card, so that's got 256 gigs on it. And they're now available in 512 gigs, so they're even smaller. They're quite expensive. And my next computer is not going to have that slot anymore, so that function. That's why I've got this thing. That's 4 times bigger capacity-wise, and it's compatible with every model. So, yeah, they're quite handy. So, Carbon Copy Cloner has the ability to set up a task for a particular volume. So you could set up. I could set up a copy of that particular volume to another one. Does it have? It looks like its tasks are set up around volumes, so you can't set up a task which says back up this volume and that volume, as far as I can tell, but you could set up 2 tasks which back up to 2 different destinations, or a folder or a disk image, for example, on one big particular destination. So you could set it up to, and even automate it, but once you've actually got the task created, you can just run it again. So yeah, I'll just delete that one. So for example, that one there is my previously created task for backing up to one particular clone disk. So all I have to do is plug in that drive and hit the go button, clone down the bottom there, and then that will repeat the previous clone operation for me. So if I did have multiple source drives, I just need to set up multiple tasks and tell it to run them all either on a schedule or run them manually.
Okay, so how many external drives would you need for that exercise? Would you need to have 2 different ones?
Depends on how you want to do it. If you're going to have your boot drive on a bootable clone, then I'm not sure if you can tell Carbon Copy Cloner to ignore a particular location on the external drive, but effectively what you want to do is clone everything on your internal drive to the external one, but leave. Well, you could do it with a partition on the external drive, for example. If your external drive is big enough, you could partition it, have one partition that's big enough to fit your internal drive and one partition that's big enough to fit your second source drive. That's the easy way, because then you're just basically cloning 2 different things to 2 different partitions on the single clone drive. That makes some more sense to me logically. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't want to go into too much more detail, and I can't really demonstrate what it does because it takes forever to actually do anything. But I get the impression that Carbon Copy Cloner is faster than Super Duper, but that may just be because it's the new whiz bang that I'm happier with at the moment. So I can't be certain of that. It just gives me that impression. And one thing it doesn't have is the amusing bug in Super Duper, which fails to count time correctly when it crosses the 1 hour mark. If you live in Australia or New Zealand only, it counts from 59 minutes to 2 hours. And I don't know what, for some reason, it's a bug that he knows about and isn't interested in fixing. So I don't know how they manage that bug. Is it like a time zone specific bug?
Where is he? Is he in Australia?
No. If the time zone is UTC plus 10 or higher, then at the point when it crosses from 59 minutes, 59 seconds to 1 hour, it accidentally adds 1 hour to the time. I don't know why. I can't understand why, and I'm a programmer, so I don't know how they managed to write that bug in the first place. So, but it's just a minor niggle with Super Duper. But other thing about Super Duper is it's a lot more simplified user interface. It doesn't have as many options in it as Carbon Copy Cloner, so it's a bit more straightforward. It does have a scheduler, which you only get if you pay to activate all of its features. So that's my previous backups. And one other annoyance I found with this is its last copy list doesn't tell you what year it was. So that one there is one that I've left at a friend's place, and that was actually backed up a year ago. So I'm going to visit that friend this Friday, so I'm going to collect that drive and swap it with another one, or possibly just put it at a different friend's house. So. It's one of my off-site ones. But so I do quite like Super Duper for its simplicity of user interface, but it does have Carbon Copy Cloner has definitely got more features, so it's worth considering. And you can try it, a free trial for a month if you want to ever play with it, and then decide whether you want to keep it or not. Those are the two there. Okay. Any other backup related questions? If not, we can just move on to general tips and tricks. No? Okay. Did anybody come along prepared with any tips and tricks before I get on to my one? You had one you listed, didn't you, in your backups thing, Margaret, that you wanted? Yeah, I know. You did actually have a question relating to backups, Margaret, which was some mention of the best sites or places to buy high-capacity flash and SD drives. Well, yeah, PB Technology. One thing to be aware of with, I'd suggest ascent.co.nz is a reasonably good place to go. They're a New Zealand wholesaler. Ascent, as in climbing up something. They're the place I go to get most of my computer-related components. They're actually a reseller. You order from them and they get whoever actually imports the thing or stocks it to courier it straight to you, so they don't actually stock anything themselves, but they handle all the billing and any returns and anything like that. And I find that on average they're a little bit cheaper than PB Technology, and one advantage of them is that PB Technology, except for on the sale on, of course, PB Technology charges a surcharge if you use a credit card, whereas Ascent doesn't. So if you're having to buy things with credit cards, you need to just keep that in mind. At PB Technology will want a 2.5% surcharge, but if you're paying via FPOS or cash, then that's not a problem. So Ascent is one place I like to go to. So you can do searches for things. So if I look up Samsung T5, for example, it will find the 500 gig one was 237 compared to 218. So the PBTech's actually a bit cheaper. It's worth noting that Ascent's prices includes shipping as well. PBTech's got an online store, but they'll charge you extra for shipping. But on average, Ascent is considerably cheaper than a retail outlet, so you can go and buy these things at Noah Leeming, for example, but they're going to be much more expensive. So, yeah.
So they don't tend to go in for the highest capacities that you can get
in anything. So that's why I put that question in.
Yep. So, and one thing to be aware of with the Ascent site is because they're getting things from other suppliers, what they do is they list their cheapest option for a particular part, unless it's out of stock. And if something is out of stock, they'll show you currently out of stock with the X there, like this one, but if they've got it available from another supplier, they'll show you the second entry of the same thing, available at a slightly higher price from another supplier or something like that, so you can pay a bit more and get it for somewhere else, or wait until it goes back into stock from their main supplier. But I've used a Cent for quite a while now, and I'm up to about 50 orders with them over the years. So no, because I don't generally buy anything at Apple computers, and they don't sell them. I bought one HP desktop PC, so I had a working real Windows PC, and I got that from PB Technology in one of their refurbished X-Lease computers or something like that. So it was only a couple $100 or something like that. So.
Where do you actually buy your actual
My Apple computers I buy via a friend who works for Apple, so I get a discount, but it's basically buying it from the online store. The only one in the recent years that I haven't bought, this is my new ones at least, the only one in recent years I can think of that I didn't buy online from Apple was when Dick Smith happened to have a 10% off sale on Anzac Day and I needed a new computer and they had the one I wanted, so I bought there. But there's no, as far as buying from retailers, there's no practical difference buying it from any particular retailer from Apple unless you really like dealing with the store for anything to do with warranty support or anything like that. The Dick Smith being a classic example is what happens if you buy a computer from a company which then turns around and stops existing. Then you have to go and deal with the company who supplied it to them instead, or the manufacturer or the importer, or whatever, so it gets messy. So I prefer buying things from the online Apple store anyway, even if I didn't get the discount. So yeah.
I think the Consumer Guarantees Act,
And there's really no need. I found for the repair that I was entitled to under Apple, the screen problem, all Noel Evening would have done for me is to add 2 days onto the time I was without my computer for handling. So I just went straight to the Thornton guys of
Service Plus, yeah. And Apple, if you have a warranty, even if it's out of warranty or service claim, whatever, you can ring Apple's helpline if you've bought it from Apple, and then they will handle it just as well as a retailer would. My iPhone 5 battery was failing well over a year after I bought it, so it was outside of warranty. I didn't have Apple Care, and I rang Apple. They were very keen to get me to even get a free exchange of my phone and everything, and because you're in New Zealand with the consumer guarantees, that they pointed it out to me. I didn't even need to complain to them about it, so that was good. Shane didn't have quite as good an experience with them, but they might have looked at my list of purchases and decided I was worthwhile being nice to.
I kind of got a double deal out of them. I actually got $95 worth of Apple products, but also their process was still going, so I also got a $95 refund.
Yeah, so you actually saved money in the process. But it was not as... They actually sent me a new phone and a box to post them back my old phone to Australia, and then that got fixed, and I kept the replacement, so that was, which I believe Peter's now got. I think still got it, yes. Still goes, yep. But on that subject, very briefly, I should just mention my iPhone 6 Plus, my previous one. It was up till the end of last year. Apple was doing cheap battery replacements, which they've now stopped. But while that was still available, I got this battery replaced through PB Technology on Thorn and Key. It took them 3 hours to do the full battery replacement and give me the phone back roughly. So they can actually do those in store now if you need to get an iPhone battery replaced. It used to be a send off to Apple service people and wait a week or whatever. That's Service Plus, who are...
Oh, sorry, you said PB.
Oh, sorry, mixed up. Yes, too many. I meant Service Plus. Yes, who I haven't dealt with either Obi or Connect in many years for servicing anything, so I don't know how good they are. Service Plus I've been very happy with. So I think I only know one person in recent years has had any problems with them, and generally speaking, everything's been good with them. So yep. Okay. Tips. The one I had, Margaret, you were just asking about sources, I've mentioned that, right. Spotlight. How many people here know, let's bring it up, why is it not coming up, there we are, that you can do this with Spotlight. Whoops, try typing the right key. Type in a formula and you get an answer. a reasonably complicated formula. Square root of 58 divided by sine of 5. So it supports mathematical formulas as long as you know what the symbols used for certain operations are. / for divide, asterisk for multiply, the standard computer symbols. So you can do a fairly complicated calculation in that if you need to. One that I keep doing quite often if I'm trying to calculate prices is, for example, something might be $423 and I want to add GST to it. So I do times 1.15 to calculate the GST inclusive total or whatever it might be. So that's quite handy. And you actually come down here and select that, copy it and paste it somewhere if you want to paste the answer into a different location. That's quite handy. So that's just an example. And a related one that many people may not know is what is 119.95 US dollars? It will do currency conversions. So if you type in the 3-letter currency symbol, it will convert it to your currency. So if I want to know, all right, what about the other way around? I want to know what's 119.95 New Zealand dollars. Oh, there you go, it just gave me the answer. But I don't want it in US dollars, I want it in pounds. 119.95 NZD in GBP. So it's actually got quite a few little hidden features lurking in there. And you have to know, again, you need to know what the abbreviation is. I don't know if UKP would work, it might do. No, it doesn't know that one. You have to know what the currency symbol is for it. But if it's a common one, you should be able to find it easily enough. So, and the ones that I tend to use so often are USD, NZD, AUD, GBP. So once you know them, you don't need to type them in again. A related one is if you want to do other sorts of conversions. So what is 57 feet? In metres, in centimetres, in yards. Yep, knows that one. If I want to know what's 1 mile in yards, yep, 176. I happen to know that number. That's got that right. So it'll do that sort of, and obviously not just lengths. It will do weights. So if somebody tells you that something weighs 100 pounds, it's 45.36 kilograms. That sort of thing. So there are quite a few of them hiding in there.
When you're doing that currency conversion, does that have to be an internet?
It has to, yes. The currency conversion, it has to have had an internet connection recently enough to update its conversion tables. So it may take a moment to update them the first time you type one in. Obviously, if you haven't had an internet connection for a while, the conversion rate will be out of date. Luckily, physical quantities tend to have conversion rates changing, so you should be a bit safer there. Yeah, but if you're trying to do currency conversions, it is important to be aware of that. It may not be up to date.
Dashboard up to date there?
Dashboard depends on the particular dashboard widget, but I'd hope it will tell you if the widget's got it. I haven't used it for so long. I assume it updates it, or there is a refresh button or something like that. Certainly for, if I run PeakOut, for example, which is a third-party calculator, I think it has something, it tells you somewhere, I haven't used this for so long, I'm trying to remember how you do it now. If I go back into decimal mode again and type in 25, go into conversions, oh there you go, update currency rate. So it's got this one's got an explicit update command to make sure it's up to date. It's thinking about it. It's done, and then I go into currency, and this one you can pick. I want to go from US dollars to, and I haven't used it for doing this since I don't bother, I can go US dollars to New Zealand dollars or something like that.
Does it define the difference between buy rate and sell rate?
No, it's just using the cross rate, I think. There's no setting I'm aware of to control that. You probably have to use a fancier calculator that could actually make that distinction, yeah. But at least gives you a rough idea, if not an exact figure, because obviously it's also going to give you, it won't cover things like credit cards, surcharges that the bank's going to add on and all that sort of thing. And whether or not you have to pay GST depending on where you're buying it from, what it is, and whether it's going to hit customs when you import something and you may hit the $400 threshold and have to pay GST and the fees, or it gets messy if you're trying to import things. But if you're just trying to do reasonably simple, smallish value things and trying to work out approximately what's going to cost, it's quite handy.
Quite a little scientific calculator.
Yeah, it's a good one. PeakOut, it's by James Thompson.
Are there any other,
Yeah, that one's available from the App Store, and it's also got a plugin that goes in the Today view, I think. So yeah, there it is there. So you can actually bring it up, a smaller version of it from the side view of the on Mac. If I quit that again, so you can just do quick calculations over here, or if I double click it, I think, or something, it runs a real one. Yep, and then brings the same answer up. So if you need to do more complicated calculations, and this one's got a whole bunch of useful programming functions and things, so I prefer it over the Apple one, since I don't tend to need it all that often, because I tend to use my phone if I'm doing calculations. I've got the same app on the phone, so it's quite nice. I'm sure there are other things in there, but those are the ones I often use that other people are often surprised by when I use them, so I thought it was worth sharing them. One thing I have found which is slightly annoying is I can't do this. If I want to know what 119.95 US dollars in New Zealand dollars and then multiply that by 1.15, no. You've got to do it in 2 steps. So you have to remember what the first number was, type it in again, or copy and paste it, and then type in the second part. So I should be able to say plus GST, and no, it doesn't do that either.
Does it do time zones? There are other ways of doing it.
Yeah, wouldn't have thought so.
Well, if you get 2:15 p.m. New Zealand equals USA.
I think it's just on dashboard, it's easy.
Yeah, dashboard I wouldn't rely on too heavily because it's going to disappear at some point. Apple threatened to get rid of it several times and they just haven't quite done that yet. Yeah, I haven't used it for so long.
David, quite often use Spotlight to find applications.
Yeah, that's the other thing. Obviously, if I want to run an application, I don't bother hunting for the application, I just type the name in. App Store, Activity Monitor, Microsoft, whoops, typed it wrong, there we go, Microsoft Word, Pages. Then the only problem is I've still got 2 versions of it installed. Toast, whoops. So as long as it's got an up-to-date search index, it's quite fast finding and launching applications with Spotlight. You just type the name in, and once you confirm it's matched the right one, you just push return. Finding documents obviously is what it's intended for. So if I want to find 12-digit serial numbers, there it is. I have a document where I kept a what's that done? Text edit. Oh, there we go. We had a weird problem with it opening the wrong document. Oh, there it is, took a wee while, that's all. Right, yes, I happen to have a lookup table of all of the code letters that Apple has used in their current serial numbers, so I can find out when a device is manufactured, which was published briefly on one website. Apple Legal told them to pull it, and then but it leaked across the entire internet in the meantime, so I found it repeatedly elsewhere. So it's handy reference, because it means if somebody's got a Mac, I can confirm when it was made, so useful little thing to have.
David, another question.
Yep.
If you go into the Finder window, up at the top right-hand corner, there's
Yep.
Spotlight search.
Yes.
How does that differ from Spotlight Takeoff Work?
It's just a different user interface. They're actually both using the same search engine. There are some functional differences. So, for example, if I search for 12-digit in there, it's searching just my current folder, and it's finding that same document again. It's not actually the top hit at the moment for some reason. But you have got more features you can turn on. So, where is the list of options there? You can add additional search criteria, and so you can specify things like name or kind or various other things, so it's got more precise control. You can actually do all of that stuff using the Spotlight main system menu, but you have to know the special syntax for it. I think it's something like kind colon such and such, that sort of thing. So you can actually do it using Spotlight, but find is just sometimes an easier way to do it, because you don't have to know all the magic terms. Yep. So, but for example, in here, there's Show All and Finder, and that actually just brings up a Finder window with the same search results. So it's actually doing the same thing effectively. Hello, Peter.
Is there an equivalent to Spotlight on the phone, or do you like that?
Yes. It's not as powerful, but if you are on the home screen, if you can see that, and you swipe left, it has a search field at the top. That's actually a Spotlight search field. So that will search your phone for anything that it can find which matches whatever you type. I don't think that's got the calculator built in. 12 plus 3.
Make it do currency.
Yeah, it will. Yep, it does. So it's actually got the calculator. I never bothered trying because I prefer using a real calculator in that case. But yep, it's there. So it's basically the same thing. And you can type names of apps, names of documents that are indexable. Yeah. So certainly, I have so many apps, I don't even bother remembering where all but my frequently used ones are. I just install them and forget about them. I know I've got them, so I just type the name and find it. I use Spotlight to find them. So that's easier than searching through multiple screens or trying to hard sort of organise them into a totally logical hierarchy or anything, and there's too many of them, it gets unwieldy. I often don't know what I've got on there, so, oh yeah, I've forgotten I had that, sort of thing comes up. What am I up to at the moment? 8 pages or so, yeah, something like that, but a few organised into folders, but I haven't bothered, I just use Spotlight. Any other Spotlight related things while I'm on the subject? Otherwise, anybody got any more tips they want to share that they've thought of? Yeah, see, everybody's dug out their iPads or iPhones and is playing with Spotlight apps. Seeing what else you can do. Okay, all right. Well, why don't we, if nobody else has any more tips, as it's now 9:30, we can call it a night at a reasonable hour. Does anybody have anything in particular they would like us to cover in the next upcoming meetings before we forget? And we'll have to start pondering and invent one. There may be enough stuff next month to talk about whatever Apple announced, but I suspect it will only be a partial meeting. So if there's anything else that people would like to cover, one thing I was thinking about covering at some point this year was the concept of either using a spare Mac or a virtual machine to run older Mac OS versions to deal with legacy software that not necessarily the software called legacy, which is the one case that I know a couple of people are using, but like older applications that you need to keep working when you've got a newer Mac or a newer operating system, which is something that I'm doing now on a regular basis to keep things going. So, for example, I can show you what it looks like to run virtual machine software, VMware Fusion, in a bit more detail. In fact, if I can impose, Leslie, might we be able to borrow your computer to show parallels if we were to run such a meeting? So just so we can see them side by side, that will be possibly helpful. Even though it's not running Mac stuff, it will be useful to demonstrate that. Or Leslie, Natalie, are you running it on a laptop? I can't remember now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if we could use either one of your computers, because I don't have parallels, but that will allow people to see two of them, and we can do a sort of simple feature comparison. That's a sort of topic which will be of increasing interest, I think, especially because the next macOS version is going to drop support for all 32-bit applications, and that's going to cut out quite a few old applications that people might still want to run. Old version of Pages, for example, which is already not working, so I need an alternative for that. Okay, but that will maybe next month, but it doesn't necessarily need to be next month, but we can have it soonish, I think.
You've been preparing for this sort of thing all along, but if we've got an obsolete computer on, say, Snow Leopard, and we haven't got all these sort of intermediate bits and pieces or parallels for things, you're saying we can all still rescue that?
To some extent, yes. The only thing I'm aware of that's a problem is you cannot get Mavericks or Yosemite